Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland Plain Dealer reports that Baker Mayfield if he doesn't get assurances that things will change next season, the quarterback will, quote, consider asking to be traded. The primary change he seeks relates to the offense and various philosophies. At the heart of the rift is Mayfield's relationship with Kevin Stefanski. Mayfield has, of course, 1 year left. He's got that fifth-year option, $18.5 million, and the two sides have not had significant talks of an extension. Am I wrong, or is this kind of the wrong tact? Right? I'm not crazy here, and I understand for people who aren't aware or maybe forgot, Stefanski came from Minnesota, and though they were able they were able to play well and get to the playoffs when he was in Minnesota, Stephon Diggs didn't like the system. That's why he wanted to be traded. He was essentially replaced with Justin Jefferson, and they haven't really missed a beat at wide receiver. But I don't know how you feel like you're going to throw your weight around and demand to be traded when you're coming off easily your worst season as a pro. This is what Joe Banner, who of course used to run the Cleveland Browns, told me yesterday on the Baker Mayfield situation from his perspective.
The tricky part is they can't be sure they're going to get somebody, so how do they not alienate Baker in case he's who they have to bring back and actually pursue this? I think we saw them start that last week. I mean, we saw an unusual number of compliments and explanations for Baker's season coming out of Browns front office people and their head coach. It didn't make sense to me that all of a sudden, 15 weeks into the season in which he's clearly struggled, whatever the reasons may be, that suddenly we have an offensive coordinator and a head coach making very positive comments about him, kind of justifying some of his failures. That's usually what happens when someone's trying to up the potential trade value of one of their players. So we don't know that for sure, but that's one of the reasons I suspect we're going to see them try to move on. And accomplishing that in a way that does not irreparably damage the relationship with Baker.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I want to be traded. Great, we want to trade you. Stop talking. You know, Baker Mayfield let us in on some sort of thoughts about dysfunction within the locker room and maybe front office. Then, of course, he did, kind of throw a shot at his coach and offensive coordinator after his last game, where he said, and look, he was accountable, but he also made sure to point out that we could have been put in better position to succeed as well. Like, this deal is over. I just don't know what Baker leaking this story out does for his value or likelihood to be traded. Like, nothing actually changes. They'd love to get out of the Baker Mayfield business. They'd love to get out of that fifth-year option, but he's actually making it increasingly difficult to do so. It's not just that you're taking on Baker, you're taking on $18.9, essentially $19 million. And if you're going to pay a guy that much, you're very likely to have to play him. You have a GM that didn't draft him, a head coach that didn't draft him, an offensive coordinator that didn't draft him, and he's coming off of a season where he had plenty of missteps. He seemed to lose at least part of the locker room. And whether or not he played hurt or not, it just doesn't matter. It wasn't about his throwing and his body as much as it was his decision-making. So I don't, things don't change around here. They're like, yeah, exactly. You have to play better, or we have to get a better quarterback. That's the change we would like to see around here. So I don't understand what leg he has to stand on. Yes, John Ramos, go ahead. Oh, Jason, you got one first? Go ahead. I see your hand up. I'm sorry.
Do you think that this is obviously a leak from Baker's camp, right? You think that he is so catty that this is almost like your buddy telling all of his buddies that I broke up with her and she didn't break up with me. It's almost like a saving face thing here, right?
Yes. No, I wanted to be traded. Sure you did. Sure. You were the number one overall pick for the Cleveland Browns, and you've done all these ads where, the stadium is your home, right? And now you want to be traded because you didn't agree with their offensive philosophy. Here's their offensive philosophy. Throw it to our team, not to the other team. That's generally a good offensive philosophy. What do you guys think? You guys want to employ that one? Ramos, what do you got?
Well, my question would be if, you talk about them not wanting to give him the money. So the thing would be, A, he accepts less money to be the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, or another team he leaves and another team needs, because you did talk about other teams needing quarterbacks. Would he be optional to be at another team? Is he good enough to you to be at another team, or is he just not good enough, period, for anybody? Nobody wants Baker Mayfield. Is that where are we at with this?
Well, I don't know if anyone wants Baker Mayfield. Thinks Baker Mayfield is the answer at quarterback to be a starter. I mean, like, look, if Freddie Kitchens can somehow hold on to his job in New York, if those guys can somehow coach for one more year, could you see him being a backup in New York or then bringing him over to compete? Maybe. I don't know. You got to go somewhere where you had some sort of success. And he had success with Kitchens calling his plays before Kitchens became the head coach, and then it was a bit of a mess. But I don't know. I don't see. Could he take less? The answer is, I mean, they all could, but you think he's going to take less than $18.9 million guaranteed? The only way he'd take less money is if you said, all right, extend me. You give me a new contract, give it 3 years, and we do it at, in the 20s. But why would Cleveland do that? If they don't think Baker's the guy, or if they're not sure Baker's the guy, you don't have to negotiate with him right now at all. He's under contract for another year. At any point in time, you can write an extension. And worst case scenario, if you had to, you could throw the franchise tag on him, or you could let him go on the market at the end of next year. No, this is going to happen this offseason. And to answer your question, John, no, he can't. He can, but it's a lot like Sam Darnold. The Jets owed Sam Darnold the 5th-year option. So when they traded him to Carolina extended him, so he got 2 years of guaranteed money instead of 1, and the payment isn't as much in year 1. Doesn't hurt him as much in the cap. Which is why Sam Darnold's going to get another opportunity unless they get Deshaun Watson, because they're still on the hook for like $20 million next year. I just don't understand. Like, you want to talk about some lower intestinal fortitude to come off of a terrible season where, I mean, he was just bad the last couple. I mean, it went from, okay, maybe it's not that good, maybe he's playing hurt too. Now he's just seeing ghosts and it's bad. He should not be out there. To go from that to, if you don't change, I want to be traded. Like, what? That takes some, the Yiddish term is chutzpah, or nerve. Bayer, what do you think? You think the Cleveland Browns are going to acquiesce and change their play caller and their head coach to keep Baker Mayfield happy?
No, and I think that their play calling and their head coach kind of led everything to get to this point. I mean, to let Baker Mayfield throw the football as much as they did in the health that he was in is question enough to me. It was almost like, to me, as if Stefanski and the staff are like, all right, fans, we are really going to show you why we don't need him or why we can't have him around here for the next few years,
sure,
even though he was banged up. So I think that that's an issue. And if that's the type of football that Baker Mayfield wants to play and throwing the wide receivers and not tight ends, as he said, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in Cleveland, so you might as well look somewhere else. I don't see a fit. I also think, Doug, that at some point, and this happens in a lot of spots in the NFL, apathy starts to set in. We get a little tired about stuff, and I think that Cleveland is maybe starting to tire a little bit with Baker Mayfield. And so
I think it's. I don't think maybe. I think it's definitely.
And so so what can you really gain from bringing him back next year? What kind of year would he have to have for them to change their feelings? It would have to be an all-pro type of year, and that's why I think it signals that it's likely the end.
Well, I also think, and you guys tell me if you think I'm wrong, and maybe this is more of a Cleveland question, but from the outside, Pittsburgh they were a quarterbackless team. I don't know if they can fix it. All depends on who they can get next year. But if there was ever a year in which the Browns should be successful, the Ravens were very average this year. Very average. And Lamar hasn't played the last 3 games, right? So Lamar wasn't great. The Ravens have been very average. The Steelers are very average. And though the Bengals are good, like the idea, the Steelers are going to be better. The Ravens are going to be better. Those are 2 franchises that down years are 500 years for them. Normally they win 12 to 14 games. That's just go look historically. That's what happens. They're not down for long because they're such well-run organizations. So this was the best possible time for Cleveland. Now, fast forward to 1 year later, the 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 division's going to be better. So I'm with you. I think this thing is done. And I think it was one of those things where when Cleveland was down, when they hadn't won a game, they won one game in 2 years combined. When it's then, you needed a guy who stuck out his chest and said, I want to be here. This is my spot. Cleveland against everybody. But then at some point, it's about tangible. It's just not that good. And all that other stuff becomes carnival barker things.